God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello, and I am speaking on behalf of the Committee for a Christian President. I'm thankful to anyone who might be listening. As you can see on the Facebook page, Committee for a Christian President, I'd initially thought of running for president, actually, but having never really had an interest in politics and honestly never voted in my 55 years of existence and not ever planning to vote, I might endorse a candidate one day, but probably not, because as a Christian, that candidate would only be Jesus Christ, and he is not running for president. And if he took issue with anybody in his day, which is not much different than our day, because he is a living God, is he had issue with the politicians. They actually murdered him, the government. And he had more of an issue with the spiritual leaders, back then called the scribes and Pharisees, because he knew that God was always more important than government. While he respected the government, and he was a law-abiding citizen, they accused him of not being one, and he saw the political process and all its evil-mindedness and corruption. But again, he was more concerned with God and, in fact, his Father and the Holy Spirit for people. But what he realized was that people, when they didn't look up to God, they typically looked up to their government. Because anybody who doesn't believe in God is their own God. I mean, what do they believe in? What determines ultimately their morals, their belief systems, the commandments, or quote-unquote commandments they follow? Well, themselves. And there's really three powerful forces in God's universe, spiritual forces that people believe in. They either believe in God, the Holy Spirit, and that is what possesses you, or they believe, thinking they believe in God, or they believe in themselves, and in that case they're satanically, demonically possessed, and they're believing in the devil. Or they believe, as I noted, in themselves. And if you believe in yourself, you're basically just a conduit between you and Satan. So anybody who doesn't believe in God, that's the biggest pride. They believe in themselves. They believe they're deceived. They're going to be deceived by Satan, and they become their own God. And that's actually the first commandment. Thou shalt have no gods before me. So having said that, people tend to do that with regards to their government. Or if they believe in themselves, then they believe in other people. Now, what you need to believe in is the people that God believes in. We have a motto, or I had a motto called Believe the Dream. It's less about the quote-unquote American dream, which is people's, mindset and mantra, but more about the belief in God and how God would, or Jesus would be if he were president, or how Jesus would be if he were, as I compare the presidents to the Caesars of the old Roman Empire. And as you've heard me state before, this is a new, unholy, I call it, Roman Empire, and it's only going to dissolve and be destroyed. It's just a matter of time. But the person who heads the government, the leader of the government, is, as it's been called, quote-unquote, the most powerful man in the world, can only help with the people's survival, not restoration, because it's going to be extinct. So anytime you hear people telling you that America is only getting better, that's incorrect. Anybody who tells you America is the greatest nation on earth is incorrect. Anybody who tells you, about hope, and I believe in hope, I believe in faith, and God says, you know what, if people will take their knees and humble themselves before me, he'll restore their nation or their country. But this United States of America doesn't do that. Now, I live here, so I respect them. They help me financially, so I respect them. There's many things I respect about the U.S., but I'm also able to sit back, and I'm certainly an imperfect sinner, and look back and be a wise judge. And much like the U.S. has a Supreme Court of judges, and you have judges determine the law and the Constitution, But Jesus is a judge, and he says at the end of days, he's going to judge every one of us. Now, there is the scripture that people misconstrue and confuse. It says, judge not, lest ye be judged. Well, just briefly, with that, as people hear that, they say that just means don't judge. No. What that means is if you're going to judge, you have to be willing to sacrifice yourself, as Jesus did for us, in taking the judgment you put on somebody else. Meaning, if you want to condemn somebody to imprisonment, you better be willing to take that imprisonment yourself, or take it on their behalf selflessly. And you must be able to judge righteously, and judge knowing that you're judging from God's perspective. And you should be open to being also judged yourself, and realizing if you're going to, the expression is, he who lives in glass houses should throw stones. So unless you're willing to take accountability and responsibility and be judged yourself, you have no right to judge other people. Now, I'm blessed to be able to say proudly, in a positive pride way, not ungodly pridefulness, that I don't mind being a judge. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, because I'm the first to open myself up to the judgment of God every moment, and would stand in front of every human being to the point of sacrificing my life, and that's what God had, asks us to do. But again, my point behind all of that is really with a Christian the Committee for a Christian President, is since I'm not myself running, whether this committee ever becomes something that's truly formulated. I mean, I appreciate, again, the people who listen or read, or I see, periodically, just as I posted on Facebook, people will come and view the page. But as a committee, the committee right now is as big as myself and God. And that's the only committee anybody really needs, okay? Anybody wants to follow, then that would be a blessing. I mean, you're only going to be getting and drawing yourself closer to Christ. And I have an expression that I coined that says, leaders are followers who know where they're going. I mean, we're all following somebody. Ultimately, we're all following God. Well, at least we would prayerfully hope to choose to follow God, but we're all following our Creator. I mean, he created all of us. And so having said that, we're all in a sense following. You just need to know who you're serving and who you're following. And are you following yourself? Are you following, those who are misleading you, whether they're government politicians or whether they're Christian leaders or any kind of church or religious leaders? Or are you following Satan, as most people are following? Jesus said, he who's not for me is against me. Okay, so you're either an anti-Christian or you're Christian. That's it. So having said that, I'm going to make some comments on this quote-unquote Christian nation we live in, and some things that are going on in this political campaign, in this race, and this is just days before, I guess, the beginning of the official process, the Iowa caucuses. And I haven't commented in a while, but I do tune into the news, and the news seems to be nothing but a broadcast of, political happenings. It's just like political. I mean, even all three of them, MSNBC, the ones at least I watch, or CNN and Fox News, they all seem to be just political broadcasting. And that's, sort of part of the populist process and the corruption of politics, and whether that's the media or the fact that that's what people want to see. There's so much news to be covered, different kinds of news. I mean, you can keep a 24-hour news channel going and never talk about politics. Surely it's one of the most important things going on in this nation. I understand that. But again, with so much time devoted to it, the media becomes so much more powerful. People, tune in. The general population is so misguided by Satan through the airwaves and the way he works, and I mean, and you can just hear it in some of the rhetoric. And I made some notes here, so before I get to these policies, I'll say things like, when you hear people talk about conservatives and he's a great conservative, well, he's either a Christian or he's not. And Jesus is the greatest conservative, if you will, quote-unquote conservative ever. He's more conservative than people who call themselves conservatives. He's God. He's perfection. So having said that, you'll hear terms like that, or even evangelical. Now, I understand that, I guess the root behind that is the word, evangelize or evangelism, and I can appreciate that more than the term conservative, because conservative can then apply to anybody who's a non-Christian. They're just maybe a less, I don't want to say aggressive is not probably the right word, but they're a more standard, traditional, calmer, if you will, less erratic, more consistent, if you will, human, and they'll call them a conservative, and then others will call Christians conservative. So, and it's sort of another word for Christian. It's not unlike saying, Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas. Say Christ, say Christian. If you're a Christian, say you're a Christian. Now, again, what Jesus would have the most issue with, and I can certainly take issue with, although I do want to say a quote that, or at least a policy my father once taught me, which was a great one. He said, what, if you can't, and you've heard it said this way, if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. I mean, that's actually very scriptural. The Apostle Paul spoke about that often. So I'm not going to do that, and you see so many of this bashing. I mean, I will be critical and judgmental, but I know that every human being, including myself, has a good side and a bad side. And the lesson that my father had, taught me was that he had said, wisely, he said, what? Just go out, and I would love to see a politician do this at some point. Just say, what, the other person would be a great president. I just think I would be that much better. Or the other person would be a good president. I just think I can do better. Something to that effect. Not the way that America, this nation, runs, which is on such Satanism, which is negative, which is ungodly, slanderous, and libelous, and it's just, the only person, like I said, the only people Jesus ever really spoke poorly about, he didn't speak poorly about, the sinners who were, the lepers or the diseased or, the tax collectors, or people, not that collecting taxes was necessarily sinful, but the people scorned, the lowest people on the ladder, if you will. He was in defense of all of the sinners, the addicts, the prostitutes, the ungodly. I mean, he was for them. But what he had a real problem with was those who portrayed themselves as quote-unquote Christians or quote-unquote conservatives or quote-unquote evangelicals, and yet didn't follow the commandments or didn't follow, as you would hear in a political election, the policies that Jesus would if he were the leader of this nation. And that's the people who, the Bible says, to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you're going to be given the mantle of being a Christian and given the opportunity to lead or be powerful or rule over people, you better do it from a Christian's perspective, and you better do it righteously. And Jesus said, there was a point where they had asked him, they said, how do we know, we're a real follower of yours? And they say, he who follows my commandments. And there's only 10 of them. They're not difficult to follow. Okay, and if you really wanted to just look at a constitution, I'll say there's more than 10 commandments. Okay, there's 10, and then there's the 2, or actually 3. Love God with all your heart, mind, body, soul, and being, and love your neighbor as yourself. So when you quote that scripture, what people don't realize is it's not just God and your neighbor, it's also loving yourself. And when you love yourself, you're going to do certain things, and you're going to want that for other people, and you're going to preach that to other people, and that's going to be your quote-unquote policy. Okay, but people don't, so let's say 13 commandments in a sense, okay? But these Christian or quote-unquote conservatives or, politicians don't do that necessarily. I mean, I can understand people make mistakes. I can understand people are imperfect. I can understand people are deceived. But when you have a platform and a voice, whether it's through the media or through the electorate, you have better make sure if, and God spoke creation into existence, so he knows the power of the word. And really that's what these political campaigns are about. It's what the people say. It's what's written about them. It's not necessarily their actions of the past or what they've done or how they've built their career. I mean, you've got a couple people in the election that are really renowned that were never even in the political process before, never served in the government office. They call them, outsiders, if you will, or the non-establishment candidates. And there's one in particular who wants to call himself a non-establishment candidate, yet he was a senator, I believe, or I think he's a senator. That's a government office. That doesn't make you an outsider. So I'm going to speak about all I almost wanted to say something else, but I'm going to speak about some of the people that are running. Again, just to give you a good and bad, but not bash them negatively. In a way, they all deserve our respect. They've all worked hard. They're all, have many great positive qualities. I'm not going to, do as other politicians do, and I don't believe it should be done. But let me first get into some of these, the policies that are going on that are, people are talking about. And when I hear even the word policies, here's one of the notes I have. When people say, we want to talk issues, we want to talk policies, well, you know what? The president is really almost a government figurehead. There's such a political, bureaucratic process in government and amounts of people behind that process in every position of government that really to change a policy, I would only imagine. I don't have the statistical data on it, and I with my NFL and NBA-ESP.com, as you may or well not know, I'm blessed, very mathematical mind, strategic mind, and God uses math as a language, uses numbers as a language. So, having said that, I've done, in some study, I would say if a 4-year term of a president, or typically an 8-year term now, it's really, you're in for one, one term, you're usually in for 2. That's what you really run for, and you should run for. You should want to be there 8 years. It's almost like a quote-unquote loser mentality to only think you want to get in there for 4 years, and you have to strategize to win 8 years. Actually, sitting President Obama did that, and he did it quite successfully. I could just tell watching some of his campaign. But anyway, I can only project that if you tried to change 10 things, you would probably only, or institute 10 policies in your term of 8 years as a president, you're only really going to turn one of them. You're only going to establish one clear thing that you did. It's just so much bureaucracy, and it takes so much time, and that just it never gets done. So all this talk about policies is just really trying to just, move the human mind into what your belief system is, and then what the politicians do, and the word politician is similar to policy, is that they just try to pick the populist mindset, where they're going to get the most votes. What kind of person are you? You have 10 qualities. Okay, how do you feel about abortion? How do you feel about immigration? How do you feel about the economy? How do you feel about taxes? How do you feel about health care? Whatever it is, and just try to get the largest masses. All right, well, so what are your 10 beliefs? What are your 10 personal commandments you live by? Okay, and that's simply what they try to do. And the person who does that, and again, I'm not a believer in the democratic system. I believe in anything, a monarchy or a theocracy, which means Jesus is running the place. Okay, I hear things like, quote unquote, here's the policy on this Muslim ban. Okay, well, that's not surprising in the sense that, in the Roman Empire, they honored many gods. Okay, that nation, that country, got destroyed. The Roman Empire, the conglomeration of countries called the Roman Empire, because they honored multiple gods. I mean, they had a god of the sun, a god of the land, a god of the sky. I mean, there were all sorts of gods, evil gods, demonic, gods, small case G-O-D, gods, and then when the Christians were there, they were burned and persecuted, the true Christians who believed in Jesus, okay? And in this country, in this nation, the most persecuted people are Christians, okay, believe it or not, and yet you'll hear the U.S. call itself a Christian nation. That's the kind of hypocrisy that God disdains. Now, what this nation is, not unlike that unholy Roman Empire, is a nation of many gods. And that's all you have to do is go to your street corner, and you'll see an Islamic church, a Jewish church, you'll see a Sikh church, or a Jewish temple, I should say. I mean, you'll see all different religions. I mean, you'll see, just watch on the day we celebrate the Sabbath here on Sunday morning on the networks. You don't see godly programming. That's buried in cable that they have to pay for, somewhere up on the channel list. What do you hear? You see political programming, Face the Nation, other programs, This Week in the U.S. or whatever. I just threw that name out there. I'm sure that's not even a real name. But the moral of the story is, this is our day. We're supposed to celebrate the Sabbath. Are we talking about God, or we have peace, or are we talking about love and life, or we're talking government and politics? So again, this, with regards to a Muslim ban, Islam, if people don't want to talk about Islamic terrorism or ISIS, and that this is a religious war, it's a spiritual war, and Christians are also in a spiritual war. Okay, and they're going out there, and they are doing some of these things that Muslims take anger with, and take cause against. Now, should they murder in their name? No, that's what separates the Islamic, extremists, if you will, from Christians. Jesus was willing to die on the cross, having never taken a life. He was willing to sacrifice his life. He would never endorse killing, never did, never will. But that's what, Islamic people do. But again, they have many good points. I mean, they pray more than Americans for the most part, I would imagine. You know, they pray 5 times a day to God. Most Americans don't pray once, or even Christians. Hope prayerfully in the morning or in the nighttime. I don't know. I mean, that's typically the quote-unquote tradition. You know, but they have, you know, the Prophet Muhammad got a lot of his, you know, inspiration from Jesus. I've read the Quran once. I haven't studied it in quite a while, but I do understand their point. You know, and how America can be very hypocritical. You know, I mean, they have propaganda just like the communist nations used to have it. They have their belief system that they believe is right. They don't use their power righteously, you know, being the most powerful nation in the world. They don't, you know, they don't put their economic strength to the best use. I mean, you know, I can understand the unrest in the Islamic nations. I mean, but I don't, you know, that's a conversation, and I could talk about all these subjects at length. But the moral of the story is, you know, there is this, you know, Islamic spiritual problem and our own Christian problem. You know what I mean? If you're a Christian nation, then in a sense, you don't let a lot, you know, Islamic temples be built. I mean, you don't honor that God. You respect these people, you love them, but you know, you try to get them to the cause of Christ. You know, you want to let them flourish and grow, and it could be any religion that's apart from being a Christian. Okay? And the biggest most deceptive religion on earth these days is really this quote-unquote God who is not a Christian God. He's an all-encompassing, universal, loves everybody, you're going to all get to heaven anyway God, who loves and respects all religions. Now, I'm not saying God doesn't love everybody. He gave birth to everybody, so he does. You know, and everybody has the choice to make to become his child. Okay? But not everybody makes that choice, and many reject him. Okay? And go in a different direction. And I understand people get deceived. I mean, Satan, when he deceives, he didn't come out and club you over the head and tell you, you know what, I'm going to do something like when he deceived Eve and Eve deceived Adam, or misled Adam, and Adam unwisely listened to Eve. He didn't go out, Satan, and say, you know what, you're going to eat from this tree of knowledge and you're going to ruin, you know, the tree of good and evil and life and death and knowledge, and you're going to eat from this tree and you're going to ruin mankind forever. He didn't just come out and say that. Eve probably would have been smart enough not to listen. And the devil still approaches us this way. Not coming at you telling you he's going to kill you, but deceptively leading you into a trap. He comes as an angel of light. He makes it look good. It sounds good. It seems right to you. Okay, and there's a scripture that says there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it all is destruction. It turns into destruction. And so that's what you hear with this God loves everybody, all-encompassing, loving God of the universe, and you know, whatever, how, you know, everybody who says, I'm going to keep you in my thoughts and prayers. Well, if you're not a Christian, your thoughts and prayers are, you know, are not going to get you to God. And you're not really doing any person who, you know, whether they get slain on a street corner or they suffer an injury or it's a nation of people or it's a, you know, some tragedy, some, you know, act of nature. I mean, and everybody says, I'm going to keep you in my thoughts and prayers. I mean, there was just this recent blizzard on the East Coast. And I actually had said to somebody that, you know, people, instead of living in fear and being upset about this blizzard and angry and in fear, they should be joyous. This is God's nature at work. This is a wonderful event to see, you know, a lot of snow, a lot of wind. I mean, these are beautiful events, and if you handle that wisely and look at it from a godly perspective, there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to worry about. God has a reason for sending that nature and to that degree, and He's only really does it for two reasons. Number one is He wants to send you a sign. He's speaking to us. He's telling us something. Or number two, He's angry in a sense, or He let the devil, you know, pervert, somehow do something very destructive with this nature. But nobody needs to die in any natural, you know, I'm not going to say disaster because disaster is the connotation that people have died, but nobody needs to, you know, lose a life over a huge act of nature. You know, Moses split the Red Sea. I mean, Jesus moved mountains. I mean, there's many instances. Noah, you know, outlived the flood of the entire planet. Noah and his people on the ark. Okay, so no person has to die in any natural disaster, okay, except for the one at the end of time, that one which is coming. In that one, God is going to, in a way, say, I had enough. And that's actually, I don't want to get into my whole, you know, prophetically what I believe God has showed me about that. This isn't the time or place for it, but I'm just saying that, you know, for Satan to do something destructive, he actually has to get permission from God. But all this in the political realm means this. Here's what was my point about the blizzard is we have the choice to be Christians, to follow God, to do the righteous and right thing, okay? And that we, you know, have to make certain if we're going to speak about God, if we're going to call ourselves an evangelical or a Christian candidate, you know, you have to truly, you know, and I'm blessed to be able to, you know, look back and say, you know what, this isn't the right thing. Jesus wouldn't want to destroy ISIS off the face of the planet. He wouldn't want to murder him into oblivion. He would want to convert him and save him and love him and heal him. So when you hear all this term, you know, these evangelicals or conservatives, quote-unquote evangelicals or quote-unquote conservatives, and definitely quote-unquote Christians saying, you know what, we're going to go to war. God isn't about war. He's about peace. And these people are going to have God to answer to. So some of the other policies I wanted to mention that I have noted here, one I'm looking at says tighten up and go up. And what that is, you might have heard me mention before, is about the economy. I mean, the U.S. is in debt just like the Roman Empire was and is not getting any more out of debt. In my last message, I spoke on how this debt occurs. And the only way to get out of this debt is to stop spending and start saving. And to, you know, I'll use in a word, be economic about the things that we invest our time and money in. And if you recall, I said the only thing not the only thing, let me rephrase that. What's more valuable than money is time. And what are you doing with your time that society accepts you and gives you some barter dollar bill that's really just a score of your possessions? I mean, everybody's possession has value right down to their own self. What will people be willing to give you their possessions, you know, represented by a dollar bill or $100 bill, whatever the case, for what you do with your time, what you say, what have you created? God was a creator. In the beginning, God created. That's the first thing he did after, you know, creating in a sense time was he created. So what are you creating? What are you doing with your time? I mean, you look at the U.S. economy, you really only have to watch television indicators to get an idea. I watch the evening news. It's nothing but drug commercials. You come out, you tell me I've got some health issue, you give some acronym to the problem. You come out with some fancy drug name. They all sound the same. Okay? And then you sell to the people who believe that that's what they need. I mean, when you talk about health care in the country, okay, the reason people are unhealthy is the primary reason is, one, because they don't treat their bodies like a temple to the Holy Spirit. They don't have the Holy Spirit. They're not Christian. They're ungodly. And I can give you one of the basic things that 99.9% of the population, this isn't just in the U.S., this is nationally, worldwide as well, is they eat animals. I mean, I see all these shows and all these people talking about, oh, well, you know, I'm here campaigning and I had a big hamburger or I had a big steak. You're eating an animal, a beautiful, godly creation. It's sickening. It's an addiction. I mean, the animals were here before us. I mean, think about it. The animals, in a sense, should be eating us. If God wanted the animals to be our food source, then he would have made them after us. We would have been here on the planet, got hungry, God said, well, here, I'm going to give you these animals to eat. He didn't do that. He gave them to Adam to name, to give an identity to. They're beautiful, beautiful, godly creations. And I'll tell you, as a vegetarian, I don't need to eat it and I won't die. You know, I don't need to eat it to survive and I won't die if I don't eat it. The healthiest any human being can be is when they don't eat animals. And if you don't eat animals, you don't drink drugs, you don't smoke things, legalize marijuana, cigarettes. God didn't intend, and I'll get into this in a minute when I make a note on solar energy here, that God didn't intend for you to burn things. You burn these beautiful creations of the plants he gave. He's got a big fiery ball called the sun. You want to get some heat? And this will get me to the solar energy comment I want to make. But there's your fire. There's your warmth. You don't need to put things in your body, and then you eat all this meat, and what people call meat. It's not meat. It's dead animal. You eat this dead animal, then you will put one drug after another drug. I mean, it's an old joke, but look at the side effects of these drugs. Well, this is going to cure your, fingernails hurting, but side effects are death. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. I mean, God forgive the people. Satan is so deceptive, and people are so foolish. So you want to talk about health care, and people, the greatest health care, and anybody who can probably tell you this, they don't, is prevention. And what's the most preventative thing? Stop eating meat, stop drinking, stop smoking, stop being addicted to drugs, stop abusing and terrorizing your body, and go out and get some exercise, walk, appreciate nature, eat right, and take care of yourself. You won't have to go to hospitals. You won't need insurance or health care and anything like that. It's a trap, and then you end up this is what people want to invest their time and their money into, their life, their thought process. It's simple. Thou shalt not kill. That's the critters too, more so than us, in a sense. Well, I mentioned solar energy. I had spoke about this decades ago. It makes no sense to burn your own planet. Any chance you have to not burn the planet, you should. So anytime you'll hear a politician talk about we need a pipeline and we need more oil and we need this, that, or the other, some other resource by burning it, I mean, there's a reason the hell is referred to as being a place of fire, and there's the lake of fire. And fire, for the most part, is not necessarily a good thing, and it's symbolic of bad and evil. Solar energy should have been technologically advanced and done by now, in a sense. I mean, the United States, if you want to be a Christian nation with the technology people have, and with computers and in Silicon Valley and this and that, I mean, my gosh, we should have had an infrastructure of all solar energy that we never had a need for oil, and we never wanted to have oil wells. Somebody I just met from Long Beach, California, said, Long Beach, what a great place to live. I've been to Long Beach. It's beautiful right up until the point you hit the ocean, and it all smells like oil, and you see the oil rigs out there poisoning the skyline, blurring the skyline. We don't need our own oil. We don't need fracking, dehydrating the earth, if you will. And I don't want to maybe say fracking because I haven't studied it that much about, the gaseous thing and this and that. But the amounts of oil, I don't know that much enough about it. But I do know about oil, and I do know about burning. So I'm all for solar energy, and that's what we should have been for. And the nation wouldn't have such pollution. And people talk about global warming. It's not an issue. No, it is an issue. It is an issue. I mean, the planet is burning. We're burning our own planet. Not just the U.S. The whole planet is burning, and we're doing it. And there's a reason. There's a cause and reaction to everything. And there's a reason the planet has climate change and global warming. We're screwing it up, and it is an issue. Well, some of the other issues I have a note here, and I could come up with so many. All I have to do is listen to a couple other people talk, and I can hear the ungodliness in them speaking. One is this equal pay for women. It's a note I had here when I mentioned economy. That is not a Christian policy, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, it's going to at first be an affront to people or an offense, but you got to listen to my reason behind it. And I mentioned this early on. Especially in the U.S. In the U.S. economy, there's this, I used to have to do sales work, and in salesmanship, you're taught basically one principle to begin with. Women buy by feel, and men buy by information. So the example, the analogy used was like when a husband comes home, she'll say, "Dear, how was your day?" And he'll say, "What's for dinner?" Okay, he wants information. She wants to know about feelings. The other thing is that, and I heard this from a minister in relation, is that men all want respect. That's the number one, emotional feeling or characteristic that men want to have. They want to have respect, and women want security. They want to feel secure. They want to be secure, whether that equates to financial security or emotional security, the security of a relationship, whatever the case may be. Okay, and I'm not necessarily, without getting into a deep study or dissertation about it, I'm not disputing either of those thought processes, okay, that it's, that's the way men and women think. Now, in our economy and the way our life works, okay, for the most part, the male is the dominant, which he should be. The male should take care of the woman, he should. He should have a secure environment for the woman, he should. But he should also be respected. And in our nation, women are, disrespecting men but still wanting their security. And men, let's say, may be disrespecting women or even themselves and not providing women security. And if it's something as simple as when, in our culture, in our United States, when you go out to dinner, the man is always expected to pay. And men have to pay for everything when it comes to a woman. Women don't, they don't feel they should have to pay for anything. Well, if that's the case, men are going to need more money. And when you pay women the same as you pay a man, okay, what you're neglecting to think about is the spiritual nature behind where all that money is going to go. So in a sense, it's like the old phrasing in a dysfunctional marriage. The woman will say, what's mine is mine and what's his is ours. Okay, that kind of mentality. So you're going to empower women, and not that some women shouldn't get more empowered in some ways, where they're powerless. They should have human dignity and respect, even women getting respect, and they should, and I'll just use the three basic words: love, life, and peace. They should have life, they should have love, they should have peace. But the male is the dominant of the species. Okay, he's the dominant gender. It's up to him. He is scripturally throughout, even in a relationship, the woman follows the man and the man follows Christ. And the woman should treat her man like, Christ-like, and the man should treat the woman like he's God. Okay? But we don't do that in this nation. We don't do that in relationships. We don't do that, even in, if you're not in a married relationship. I mean, just look at the culture. I mean, men marrying men, women marrying women. It's ungodly. It's ungodly. This is what it leads to. This is just one manifestation of that, breaking of this commandment. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay, now, and people, chide the Islamic nation because they say, oh, their women are inferior, and their women are, beat down, and their women are, this. Now, no, women are superior in the sense that if they stopped giving birth, the planet would be extinct. Okay? Now, I'm not being sexist about it. I'm being godly about it. Okay? And no woman should be hit or beat down. I didn't mean it that way either. But I mean, there's other cultures that are, where women, if I said something like they know their place, so that's going to be misquoted, or people are going to be, get all, upset about it. I mean, men have their place too. Men should be put in their place. They have their certain place. And I'm not, saying it just needs to be the kitchen or the bedroom, that old expression. But you know what? There's a hierarchy. There's an order. God is highly organized in the way he made creation. And the closer a country can exist to creation, the better. Man was created before woman. Womankind. That's just the way God wanted it. And males are supposed to be godly, reflections of Christ, just as women are supposed to be female, reflections of what Christ would be if he were a female, which he was not. He didn't have women at his Last Supper. Mary wasn't, his wife or his girlfriend. It's blasphemy. So in some ways, these other cultures have it right. And when you empower women too much, or women, don't use what powers they do have, the power to give birth correctly, what do women do? They end up wanting abortions. They call it, they want liberty, they want freedom, they want their own choice. But your choice is going to extinct a godly creation? It's going to exterminate a godly creation? That's not a good choice. That's not a godly choice. God gave you your free will choice. This is for men and women. He gave us our free will choice to do his thing, his righteous choice. He didn't make us robots. But people don't make the right choices. And again, in closing on that, equal pay for women is not a wise financial stewardship of the gifts of material things on earth God has given us or we have made, using our godly minds for the most part. But again, we make so many ungodly things, it's terrible. A bomb, a gun, ridiculous, ungodly. Well, and then I hear another note I have here was when I mentioned earlier about this war in Iraq. There's no godly reason ever to have a war. I mean, these mistakes were made in the Crusades. I mean, you look at the Old Testament, where in the Jewish nations, where people were always taking God's name in the name of war. The battle we have is a spiritual battle against Satan. That's the number one battle. The next one is against each other, and that we're not to kill. Jesus didn't. He could have killed everybody. He could have wiped out the planet, but he didn't. He went to a cross and died for all of us. Peter is number one in command, went and sliced off the ear of a guard who came to arrest Jesus, and Jesus said, no, put down your weapon. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's not what, and people will pervert this and satanically say that means if somebody kills you, you can kill them. No, that's not what that says. That means if you're going to kill, you're going to be killed. It's a prediction. It's not an admonition. It's a prediction. So anybody who's for war of any kind can't call themselves a Christian. The war is against spiritual forces. And what you do is you forgive and you love and you give life and you give peace. Well, those are the only notes I want to make about, policy for the most part. Now I'm going to just make some notes on some of the people that are, some of these might even be from a perspective of NFL ESP or NBA ESP, which is my, mathematical version of Committee for a Christian President or my goals or in life or, some of the ministry or blessings God has given me. And I'm going to cover certain things maybe from a strategic point of view, but just remember in the last 18 minutes or so of this message that I'm not in a sense slamming these people. I'm not, not going to put them down. I'm just going to tell you a perspective, sitting back prayerfully from God, what his thoughts might be. I'll try to mention something good and bad about everybody, because that's the way we are. I'm the same way. I've got goodness and I've got badness. I know my badness. I was evil yesterday. Today I want to be good. So I'm going to speak powerful words of truth and godliness about some people. And these happen to be the people who are running for office here in the United States of America. So let me start with a bottom note here. I wrote down Marco Rubio. I love Marco Rubio in the sense that I think he's very talented and a blessed Latino man, Cuban. I like his name. Of course, we share the same name. He seems very presidential to me. I believe he believes in God. I've heard him speak about God. These are all great things, and I think he'd make a fine, fine president. But again, I think Jesus would be a much better president. And something Marco Rubio is doing is just not right. I can't put my finger on it yet. I didn't give it a lot of time or thought or meditation. And I'm not saying that because the American public, he's third or fourth in the polls or something. But whether that's, I've heard him take a good stand against abortion, which, if somebody had asked, and I hear this question, what would be the first thing that you would do if you were president of the United States? Well, I can answer that question right now. The first, I would even say thing, because I would want to multitask to put it, use terminology. And the first thing I would do is I would abolish abortion, the death penalty, and anything that harms life. Whether that be, I would make alcohol illegal, drugs, okay? Anything that destroys life. These are the things: life, love, and peace. God is a God of love, life, and peace. and immediately stop warring against any and everybody and just love on everybody. All right, the next candidate here I see is Mr. Kasich. I think he's the governor of Ohio. The only note I'll make is I think he might be, he seems like a nice guy. Everybody says that. I'm sure he's a good politician. He led a state. Some people can't lead their own household, let alone I. So God bless him. But he does talk too much, I think, about Ohio, which tells me he might be narrow-minded in the sense that he doesn't have enough of a world vision or a scope to lead a country. Surely this one is 50 states, okay? The District of Columbia, again, I'm not, we've got Puerto Rico, we've got, there's Hawaii, Hawaii's a state, but having said that, I want to make a bad comment about geography or, history, and because I'm not really focused on that right now. But again, I think John Kasich would be great, but I think Jesus would be the greatest. Jeb Bush. Now, I thought Jeb Bush would be doing much better than he did. Again, when you have a populist vote, and this was the last, and I'll make the note when I get to one of the candidates, something that he said that he's making a mistake, I think, strategically. But Jeb Bush has, a political dynasty of a family. That's unheralded, unheard of. Two brothers, or a father and a brother who were president. That's amazing. Now, I don't know that he has the same thing they have. I think they made mistakes going into Iraq, this war decision. You hear that people talk about that. I said that. Anybody can tell you that. You don't go to war, period. Not everybody's carrying a gun. They thought these guys had nuclear weapons. I knew that they didn't. They were just saying there was a vengeful attack from the presidency of before. And I know I'm not being clear-cut. I know what I'm thinking here. I'm not trying to misquote myself or sound, uninformed. I'm just putting out in a bland sort of way to say that, his family leadership might not, God bless them, they were presidents. That's great. But I don't think he'd be the greatest president. And it's hard to deny your family and deny their success and not want to reverse their decision. So he has to combine that, and he did not. It hasn't been. Dr. Carson, speaks probably the way more like Jesus would speak, calmly, softly, wisely. God bless him, to be a neurosurgeon is spectacular. You want to be president and not having, been in political office before is amazing, an amazing leap of faith, if you will. God bless him for that. But he doesn't show enough, and not that he's not, Christ-like, but he has said some things in his policy thinking that is ungodly, that's anti-Christian, that's against the commandment. And as devout as he sounds, and with his tone and manner, that's awesome. But Jesus also knew when to go in and upturn the table of the money changers or the tables. And there's only one real instance of Jesus getting really angry, but God is a God, who we are to fear and to be angry. In a good anger, a righteous indignation type of anger. But God, for the most part, if any candidate were to speak like Jesus in that soft tone, it would probably be Dr. Carson. But you also have to know that Jesus, had a real, and I'm not getting on the man's demeanor, but I just don't think he has the strength or the godly power to lead. The next person I wrote down here is Mr. O'Malley, who's I believe running with the Democrats. I know he is. I just saw the Democratic debate. He's running very, very incredibly distant third. He's the only third. I think he's the only other Democratic candidate who's, more or less on the radar. There's probably 100 guys running for president. When I looked at this, when I saw, how to file for the, electoral process or to be president, but I saw Mr. O'Malley speak. Good-looking guy, well-spoken. I believe he's the governor of Maryland. Probably runs the state well. I like Maryland. Seems to be a blessed state. I don't know his religious views. Certainly I should. That's my, I'm derelict in my godly duty for doing that. But having said that, well-spoken, sure has led his state. But the negative I have against, and would be a good president, and I don't want you to determine when I'm using the words good and great as a ranking system. Again, in accordance with what I said, that, they would make a good president. I just think I would do better. Again, I don't know. I do believe I would do better. Maybe not right now at this moment. Maybe by the time the election begins, I would be. But I'm not even in the election, so I can't even say anything. And the negative I have in this Mr. O'Malley is I think he's just a career politician in the sense that he's out of it. He's virtually mathematically out of it. So go with a different strategy. Okay? I mean, bow out gracefully, if you will, or put your energy to something else. But just to come out there and just debate and come out with this political rhetoric, I mean, just because it's your job job doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Doesn't mean it's a godly thing to do. So to me, I'd be like, you know what? And I got out. I got out of the election myself, running for president, because I couldn't qualify. I couldn't win. I'm not going to win this year, and I have to come to terms with that and put my godly time, energy, and creative ability to something else, or some things else, some other things. I'm sorry. The next person I have here on my list is Ted Cruz. Now, of all the candidates, the one who I most fear, in a sense, is Ted Cruz, because he has come out to purport himself to be the most godly, the most Christian. But he's also said the most ungodly things about how he would handle ISIS and his beliefs on certain, godly things with regards to life. And he would be like a scribe or a Pharisee in the sense that, I can understand his strategy, wanting to stay second to Donald Trump. Now he wants to, just days before this last Republican debate, before the caucuses, wants to debate him one-on-one. That's good strategy. But, and while that all is a wise strategy, but I think it's misleading the public, and I don't think, as blessed as he is, I'm glad that he goes out there and speaks profoundly about Jesus. That's the best thing he could do. And seems to, comes from a family of ministry, and seems to appear to the evangelical vote to be the most Christian. But I can just tell in his spirit, in something I sense, and I mentioned this somewhat before, that I would trust him less than any other candidate, only because I don't know what I'm truly getting with him. I think there's a deception there, an internal spiritual deception, almost like an anti-Christian deception, that Jesus said, you're going to see the Antichrist, he's going to sound like me, he's going to look like me, you're going to think he's me, but he's not me. So having said that, that's how I feel about, Mr. Cruz. But God bless him. Like I said, he's been a senator. He's not, he says he's not an establishment candidate. That's a lie right there. You are. You're a politician. You've worked in public office. Don't say you're like an aforementioned Dr. Carson or even Donald Trump, who's a real estate tycoon. Those people were never never politicians, and certainly not career politicians. They're your non-establishment candidates. So that right there, already was a red flag for me. The other person the other candidates here I have of note is and then I'll mention a final two who aren't running. The next one is Bernie Sanders, Democrat running. Now, I just heard him make a comment about, and again, he says some things, that are good. I'm sure he'd make a good president. I don't think he'd make the best possible president. As a matter of fact, I don't think anybody running would. Okay? And then I'll get into that strategy in a moment here. But the strategy that he said, and I'll just note this from my work with NFL and NBA, ESP, and all our, data systems of pro sports, is that he wants a lot of voter turnout. Well, Let me tell you this, and this goes for all the candidates. They're unwise, and when you see lack of wisdom or intelligence with regards to any way God communicates, math or any of the, his institutions, quote unquote, if you will, like math or numbers, okay, then you know you're not getting the wisest or most intelligent candidate. Well, when you're a low percentage candidate in the voting, okay, or in the polling, you don't want a lot of turnout, okay? When you have a lot of turnout, you get more of a public opinion, and the public is wrong about everything, whether it's picking a team or an election or a candidate, 90% of the time, okay? And most of the public, most every election, they just pick the guy who's the best they like, who seems the most likable, the best, the best speaker on the media. And then they always regret a year or two later when, something isn't going right in the nation. It happened this last president. It happened to every president I can think of in the last, all of them, basically, I can think of, back until, maybe Abraham Lincoln or somebody. But anyway, having said that, and I don't mean that to sound irreverent, but again, he shouldn't want a large turnout. A larger turnout will be more beneficial of Hillary Clinton. He should want a lower turnout and not let the numbers, play out. And that's the same for every, lower percentage candidate. And in no poll does it seem like he's winning. So again, he should want a lower voter turnout. I already mentioned Hillary Clinton, so I'll stick on her before I get to the Republican leader here, who's Donald Trump. But Hillary Clinton is actually, to her good, the most qualified of everybody running, believe it or not. I mean, as Secretary of State, as the wife of a president, I mean, that's an unbelievable combination on a resume, if you will. And she would make a good president in that sense. She, does know politics, does play the political game. I don't necessarily mean that positively, but does have the most experience. The downside is she's a female. That's all I can say. She's a woman. And no woman should be leading the nation. No woman, if God wanted women to lead a nation or a country or a planet, he would have made Eve before Adam. He did not. So women are more open to satanic deception. The Apostle Paul even said he didn't want women preaching. They're more open to satanic deception. I don't even have to begin with her policies on, marriage, gay marriage, abortion, equal pay for women. I mean, it's just it would not be the wisest, best, most godly decision to have a woman as president. It just wouldn't, period, especially this woman. So anyway, having said that, the last Republican candidate I wanted to get to in the final minutes here is Donald Trump. I appreciate how much Mr. Trump is leading in the polls and with being his very powerful rhetoric. And if the leader of the U.S. is the most powerful man in the world, this is the reason Mr. Trump, I think, and God has touched him in many ways, and I love to hear him talk about the Bible. And he's more like a Peter type than Jesus. He's very firm in what he says. He's very, passionate. I respect that. I respect that he's, done well financially, that he has a lot of personality and charisma. And he is actually, I think what people don't realize is how powerful he is, in the sense that the other politicians seem to take his lead, and he does have a powerful nature around him, which you need, a very leader-like. You are the leader of the free world, if you will. So that is to his credit, a great credit, and I think he would make a great president. But is he totally Christ-like, and would he make, a perfect president? No. Because he is bullyish. He reminds me of my, people I know. I mean, you can be godly, but you can still make mistakes like Peter did. I mean, there was a case where Jesus had to tell Peter to get behind me. You're acting like Satan. So to be a real bully like that and to say such negative things and sometimes, and I know because I don't speak perfectly, or be angry and have such anger sometimes is not, the best thing that he can do. And he can surely improve on that. And in the last minute here, the only other two candidates I wanted to mention, and again, I'm not endorsing anybody, but the two, and this is just how the government political process and spirit and nature works. Actually, the two best candidates, who would have been the two best candidates strategically, mathematically, whether it's experience or whatnot, would actually be, Mitt Romney on the Republican side and Vice President Biden on the Democratic side. But neither has chosen to run. I mean, they were having meetings. It seemed every Republican candidate was going to pay his respects or get information or advice from Mitt Romney. He's successful financially. He's got a family history in politics. You know, they're going to him. And Vice President Biden, I mean, that's just, I mean, you hire a coach in the NFL, you typically go to a coordinator or an assistant coach. You hire within the ranks. Vice President Biden seems to believe in God. He's gone through a lot. But he's not running. And that's why this political process is just really an ungodly political process of voting in a new Caesar of this, you know, unholy new Roman Empire. So right now I'm out of it. This might be my last address until, you know, the day of the election and then thereafter, or just the day of the election. But listen, I appreciate your time. I believe this message, it will be a blessed hour to you. Spread the word. In the name of Jesus, on behalf of Committee for a Christian President, this is Mark Anthony DeBello. Thank you, and God bless you.